Hey, what's up, you amazing hackers? I have this amazing hacker called John Breth here. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm good. I'm good. Appreciate you having me on the show.
It's my pleasure having you. Can you please introduce yourself for the viewers who don't know you?
Sure. Sure. So my name is John Breth. I'm a network engineer slash cybersecurity professional. I live outside the Washington, D.C. area. Um, some folks might know me from my escapades online, whether it's on Twitter or on YouTube, where I have a channel called Cyber Insight, where I like to break down IT and cybersecurity information for folks who are trying to get into the industry. Also cover some career advice type of things and also some certification help as well. And I also own my own IT and cybersecurity consulting company called JBC, which I started up maybe about 4 years ago.
That's freaking awesome. Also, the fact that you want to help other people, that's freaking amazing. I hope that the viewers get inspired by that a little bit and help their own community who is in need. You told me a little bit about your company. You do some cybersecurity consulting, but can you maybe explain to the viewers who want to be a cybersecurity consultant what that entails?
Sure. I mean, so it probably would be good for me to do a little bit of background on, where I started off in my career and kind of how I got to that point.
Yeah,
Um, because I know a lot of people like to jump right into cybersecurity right off the bat. And that wasn't necessarily my path. I started off in IT. So I was in the Air Force here in the US for 4 years, was doing some long haul telecommunication and some networking stuff. Pretty much leveraged that to be able to get some educational benefits. So I got a whole bunch of certs while I was in, CCNA, Security Plus, Network Plus. Also did my undergraduate degree. And after 4 years, I got out and transitioned into the commercial world and started working for a very well-known consulting company here in the DC area, doing kind of like network engineering and things like that. And over the course of working for them for about 6 years, kind of, got more and more experience, got more certs, went and did CCMP, CISP, CCIE written, got a graduate degree, um, kind of built up my career, starting from just a junior level network engineer up to a senior network engineer. Um, and did a lot of business development for them as well. That was kind of one of the side requirements. And in doing that and working kind of the amount of hours that you would work supporting your client and then doing business development stuff, it kind of planted the seed in my head of, if I'm going to be working this hard, I really want it to be for something that's beneficial to me and not necessarily just beneficial to some large company. Um, Not that I'm not thankful for the experience that I had there. I most definitely was, made a lot of great relationships, met a lot of great people, actually continued to work with some of those people as I moved on to other jobs in my career. Um, but it kind of planted the seed of entrepreneurship in me, in that I have no problem busting my ass for something, but I prefer it to be something that is, something that's about what I want to do, something that I'm building, something that I have some ownership over. Um, Once I left there, I moved over to start working for a tier one ISP. At that point, it started to move a little bit more from network engineering into overall architecture. So I became a principal architect on a cybersecurity program for them. So it was developing different types of cybersecurity solutions for their customer base. And that's really where I started to get a little bit more into the cybersecurity aspect of things. It kind of was a little bit of a natural transition, because I think once you work in IT long enough, you start to understand that really cybersecurity isn't something that's hold off over in a corner somewhere. It really is absolutely foundational to everything that we do in IT. Um, I kind of sometimes, where you get into this whole red team versus blue team thing. And my perspective is everybody who works in IT in the operational side of things is actually a member of the blue team. It's everybody's responsibility to operate in a secure manner, to configure things securely, to monitor their environment, and be I'm trying to think what's the word I want to use. Have some skin in the game as far as wanting to have your environment be as secure as possible.
Yes.
So you asked kind of how I got into cybersecurity. It kind of was just a natural evolution of building my expertise up through experience, and in doing that, kind of becoming responsible for certain cybersecurity aspects of the projects that I was working on.
I love that because I think our paths are very similar. I started the same way as you. I just did some general IT experience, everything from
Yep.
programmer to software tester for years. And then I finally
Yep.
got the guts to do a OSCP after a couple of years. And that was my entry
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
level. And I love that you touched on the blue teaming as well, because
Mm.
even as a developer, you're responsible for securing your code. You should never trust user unsanitized input and all that kind of stuff. So it's good that I hope that we can reach some of these developers as well. I always try to do that in my job. Um, like
Yep.
the whole experience of becoming a pen tester, like um, do you think as a red teamer that we are also a little bit responsible for like making the things that we do happen well? Like an example I can give you
Oh,
is that,
oh,
for example, if we bug bounty hunters go bug bounty hunting on a production environment, it's my opinion that we should never try to go for personal data that doesn't belong to us. We should always create two accounts that belong to us. As a pen tester inside a company, we have this responsibility to go look for vulnerabilities, but never fully exploit them. Um, that's a little bit hard for me
I
because when I started learning OSCP. Oh, we get to do privilege escalation and you get to do all of this cool stuff. But I haven't found this anywhere in the real world. Is this something you can see as a cybersecurity consultant, that we can actually do all of these cool things? Does that ever happen in real life or?
oh, I think so. I mean, so I think the perspective of doing bug bounties is a little bit more defined, kind of in a very kind of a smaller group of possibilities that you could do within an organization, and you're starting from external of the organization, where if you are either working as a pen tester or red teamer, especially a red teamer that is full-time employed by organization, oftentimes now we see things such as purple teams, right, which is a combination of the red team aspects and the blue team aspects, and they're in a constant cycle of trying to identify, protect, develop signatures, develop alerting. It's kind of a symbiotic relationship, right? Where oftentimes they are allowed to go a bit further in what it is that they're able to exploit or do. I mean, obviously, there's rules of engagement in certain cases, and sometimes those are a bit more restrictive, and sometimes it almost becomes like a joke, like, yeah, you can do this, this, and this, but these other 50 things you can't do. But other times it can be a lot more, open to those different types of things. So maybe it's you do that privilege escalation, but you don't actually deploy a payload that's going to do something malicious, right? um, and I think in a lot of those cases, it's being able to define and articulate what the vulnerability was that you were able to exploit, and what could potentially happen after the fact, right? Like if you were to actually fully exploit it. And but that's only, in my mind, that's only half of the puzzle. If you aren't actually providing ways to protect and remediate against that, and ways to alert on those types of things, then you're doing a disservice to your client as far as whatever type of red team or pen testing activities that you're doing.
Very true. That's something that we as bug bounty hunters should always stick to as well. We should always provide at least some kind of remediation, even if it's just don't allow users to access documents that are not theirs.
Sure.
That's good enough.
Right, right.
And
Yep.
and the reporting is one of the most important aspects of pen testing for me. Do you lay a lot of importance on those reports?
I think even stepping back further than that, documentation in general, whether we're talking about from a cybersecurity perspective or an IT perspective, uh, is something that a lot of people don't like to do, which is sad because it can provide so much information and have such a positive impact within environments that yeah, I mean, I think that it's one of the most important things. It's one of the things that's slept on the most. And it's actually one of those kind of like cornerstone things that whenever you kind of have new people that show up with an organization, I always recommend to them, if you can get involved somehow with identifying what documentation isn't there and needs to be done, almost like doing a gap analysis on documentation that's specific to your role. Um, it's a great way to learn an environment, to understand technologies, to understand processes, to introduce yourself to different members of different teams that are within that environment. And it also will ingratiate you to other team members because it's always something that's lagging that needs to be done. So if you're the new person that comes in and is like, hey, I noticed that, you know, we aren't actually putting together the reports with the right type of outputs that we should have, or things need to be punched up a little bit to provide a little bit more value. Or, hey, I noticed that these documents that we have, the processes don't actually match up with what we're actually doing in production, you know, from operational perspective. So I want to sit down and kind of hammer these out so that they actually are valid and useful to people. Um, I think that that is a great way to go, you know, when you're joining a new organization and then also continually trying to provide value that way.
Totally agree with that. And to follow up on that question, if somebody would come to you to be hired, is that something that you would take into account, that reporting part? Like, say they were a very bad reporter, would they have some less chance than somebody who's very good at reporting?
I mean, so I mean, that depends on a few things, right? So is it that they're bad at it because they haven't had enough exposure or experience or the right mentoring to be able to be better at it, right? Because that's different than somebody who just says, I don't like to do that. That's not in my lane. You know, that's not my responsibility, right? Somebody who just might not have had the opportunity or had somebody show them, you know, this is why we need to do this. This is the impact it's going to have. This is the format that we should use. This is the process that we need to go through. Documentation kind of ends up falling into, you know, the larger scope of communication, which is kind of like a soft skill that a lot of people sleep on, right? And if you're talking about somebody who's good at communication versus somebody who's not good at communication, and you know, I'm interviewing them for the same position, I obviously want to go with somebody who, you know, is good at communication, right? Whether that's the documentation side of that, whether that's the ability to speak to people in other groups, the ability to take concepts that might be overly technical and break them down in a way that oh, there you are.
Oh, that's great. My Zoom crashed.
Oh, which part did I get to?
It's and the communication is very important to be hired.
Oh
Um,
yeah, yep. And with that, being able to take very complex ideas and break them down and explain them to other groups that might not necessarily have that particular technical background is very important, both in IT and cybersecurity.
totally agree on that. Is because you are going to have to report to your manager, and your manager might not be as technical as you. And as bug bounty hunters, we have to report to triagers who, again, might not be as technical as us. So for me, it's very important as well that the communication is going well. When I hire, I always look at that. When I hire, though, I don't look at, for example, certificates. If somebody comes in and he has 50 certificates, or somebody comes in who has no certificates, for me, that's not particularly an indicator of quality. I don't know
Sure.
what your opinion is about that.
So I mean, there's multiple facets to that, I think. So what certificates mean to me is that it opens up the avenue for me to have discussions with that person in their interview about the particular things that they're supposed to be certified in,
That's
right? So that makes it a little bit easier to drive that conversation to be like, okay, I see you have your CCNA. That's awesome. Let's talk about what you've done with Cisco devices, right? Um, and then it at least kind of codifies uh, what I think that their minimum level of knowledge should be, right? So it helps me have an idea of what type of questions I should be able to ask them.
yes.
Um, Now, if they don't have that, then obviously that just gets flushed out in the course of the conversation as well. But it's kind of more just like a data point that you're able to bounce things off of. One kind of caveat to that, though, is if you do have certain types of clients that you have contracts with that have certain types of requirements for having certain types of certifications, right? And that's the case in some arenas. And so if the contract requirement is that, person X must have certificate A, B, and C, um, then that's kind of the scope that you have to deal with. That's not always the case, across the board when it comes to having a company and going after contracts, but there are certain types of clients that do have those types of stipulations, in the contracts. So, uh, for me, certificates were kind of a big way for me to be able to gain knowledge and show or attempt to show some type of demonstrable proficiency in things that would have been above the level that was expected of me given how young I was and how few years I had in the career field, right? So only having, 1 year as a network engineer and going and getting a CCNP opened up a lot of doors for me that if I didn't have that CCNP, it would have been very hard to justify or try to articulate. No, I really have the, skill set of a mid to senior level engineer. So again, it doesn't necessarily correlate to the fact that that person 100% has that experience. There's lots of people that go and get exam dumps and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And, that ends up coming out normally pretty easily in an interview process. When you start asking them questions about things and they're like, yeah, I don't really remember that. I might have read about it a long time ago or something like that. And, it flushes itself out. But I think that certificates have value. I don't put, all of the value on them. I think that they're beneficial for certain groups of people that need to get a little bit of an extra leg up or something like that. Um, Anything that somebody can do to make themselves be more marketable, I think is a good thing. So.
All right. Thank you very much for that answer. I totally agree with that. One more question about jobs, and then I promise I'll leave you alone about that.
No, it's all you can ask me whatever you want.
Let's say I am well, we don't have to say that because I am a junior, super, super junior in pen testing, and I want to
Yep.
get into pen testing. Now, disregard my channel, disregard all of the bug bounties that I've done. What requirements would I have to become a junior bug bounty hunter, a junior pen tester?
Um, I mean, I think that that really is going to depend upon the company and the type of work that they're doing, and the team, and what type of setup they have as far as bringing along and mentoring junior folks, right? Because it could be something where a company is looking to hire somebody that they have to have a certain level of expertise. And if the role that they're trying to fill is a mid or senior level role that needs no supervision or mentoring, then obviously that's going to be a tough role to fill. But if it's something where uh, you know they're looking for junior people that have kind of an appetite for digging into things and figuring things out, I think that asking certain types of questions about a person's background in what they have, from an IT perspective, or what they're doing that's not directly related to employment, but related to what they're doing to try to reach that goal. Asking them about their interests when it comes to pen testing, what types of labs they've done, what types of avenues within pen testing is interesting to them. I think you can kind of get a decent gauge for somebody's thirst for knowledge, and whether or not um, they're going to be good at that. I mean, you can just throw out simple scenarios and just see how they answer those from the perspective of, even if they don't know the answer, well, what type of questions are they going to ask? You have Google available to you. What process would you go through to try to identify what you should do, or what type of information you should look for, and things like that? So um, I don't think there's any there's any like perfect answer for that, but that's kind of my perspective on it. Is it completely depends on the organization and the role and the team that's there, and you know them wanting to bring in junior folks and bring them along and spin them up.
Yeah, it's like you say, it's the
I mean,
level that
everybody has to
sorry.
everybody has to start somewhere, right? And
Exactly.
everybody has to start somewhere. And we all didn't start with a very, very high level of knowledge in whatever the specialty is that we're in. So um, finding the right job opportunity, environment, and team to help foster that and bring somebody along is really, really important.
Yeah, really, really hard as well. Like you should be as selective of your job opportunity as your job opportunity is selective of you, in my opinion.
Sure.
They are very, very selective, and so should you be, because you can very easily end up in the wrong company, and that's not very fun. I've had it happen before.
Sure, you could end up in the wrong company. You could end up in a role that you were told was going to be one thing and ends up being something else. They're like, hey, we want to bring you in as a junior pen tester. And you show up, and for whatever reason, things change a little bit. And next thing you know, you're doing vulnerability management, right? You're pretty much just doing Nessus and Qualys scans on infrastructure and stuff like that. And that's not what you wanted to do. You wanted to do pen testing. But kind of once you're within the organization and they have a need for certain types of work to get done, you might be asked to do things that are outside of the lane that that you want to be in. But the flip side of that is, if you take that as an opportunity to kind of get spun up and learn as much as you can about Nessus and Qualys, that might be stuff that later on in your pen testing, might help you out in certain ways. Just kind of depends on your mindset, and making sure that whatever you do, you're kind of looking for stones to hop on to get to the next point as far as what your goal is.
Yeah, it's what you make of your situation. If you're stuck doing Nessus scans all day, then get to know Nessus inside out, right? Be an
Right.
expert
Yep.
at Nessus, and then start selling lessons on Nessus and all that
There you
stuff.
go. Yep. Yep.
When life throws you lemons, you have to make lemonade.
Right. Exactly. Yep.
And like that brings me a little bit to my hobby as well, because I spent quite a lot of hours perfecting my burp suite
Mhm.
methodology, doing my bug bounty stuff. I'm not calling it a bug bounty methodology on purpose, because I don't think methodologies work in bug bounties. But
Mm.
that's a lot of my free time goes to that. What do you spend your time on? Because I can imagine it's
Well,
pretty stressful.
so I actually have a follow-up question on that, on what you said. So instead of calling it a methodology, would you just call it like best practices?
I would call it get to know the types of targets that exist and then make a mindset for that specific technology. For example, if we're talking about a newspaper, you can hack a
Yep.
paywall, you can hack the login feature, and that's about it. If we're talking
Mhm.
about a web shop, you can hack the buying process, you can hack the returning items process, the login process. Again, that's about it. Depends on the web shop, maybe a little bit more. iDoors you can test on web shops as well. Um, and it's that kind of stuff, define your type of target and then
Mhm.
take the building blocks that you've learned and
Sure.
then walk your target using those building blocks. Whenever people start in bug bounties and they find a new target, I hear a lot of people spin up their tools or a lot of people spin up Burp and they start hacking away at stuff, looking for SQL injections, looking for cross-site scripting like
Sure.
maniacs. That's not
Yep.
the way to go. Slow down. When I do bug bounties, I explore every single request. I explore every single parameter because there are so many hidden parameters as well that you can
Mm.
exploit. And there's so many stuff. And while I do that, when I register, for example, I will insert a very simple HTML injection, a very simple JavaScript injection, and maybe also an SSTI attack factor so that when I'm testing my application, whenever my name is requested, I will automatically be testing it for all of those types of vulnerabilities in a very simple way. And then after I'm
Yep.
done with all of the logic, after I'm done with walking my application, and then I will start using my building blocks like cross-site scripting. Okay, let's dig a little bit deeper. What's happening? Where is my value being reflected? Can I control this sync specifically? So that's more of an objective that I would say is for bug bounty hunters, whereas pen testers, they would do more of a methodology, in my opinion. More of a you always need to do the same things because if you miss something, your client is not gonna be happy.
Right. So
So
what was your question that you asked me before I said that?
like for me, I spend a lot of time perfecting that kind of stuff, learning how I can identify my targets better, perfecting my building blocks. What do you spend your time on? Because I can imagine it's quite stressful running a company, then also doing the YouTube stuff and also doing your own hacking, plus your family, of course.
Sure. So I mean, I have my work stuff that's actually like client work, which I'm always doing technical research for whatever stuff I'm working on for them. Um, that's, that's kind of what keeps me fresh on things. I mean, prior to this point in my career where I had my own company, I did a lot of education and training and stuff like that to build up my career up to this point, right? Um, Now, kind of being at the architect level, I'm just trying to stay on top of trends and technologies and things like that. I'm not really doing certifications for myself at this point. So even in this past year with like all the COVID stuff going on, I started up the YouTube channel and I think I ended up doing like 7 certifications,
Nice.
but all of them were all through the mindset of creating study content on the YouTube channel for junior folks,
Yeah.
right? So I did all of the Juniper Networks associate certificates. I did that because I like Juniper Networks. Like I use Cisco a lot, but I really like Juniper as well. And they have free training for all their certifications, and they have a free lab set up. And then earlier this year, they actually were doing free vouchers for certs too. They modified that. Now it's only 75% off. But I thought it was
Holy
a really good opportunity for me to be able to kind of spread some of the knowledge that I have in regards to them and try and motivate some people to get some knowledge and certs outside of, Cisco, which everybody does. And then I did the Azure Cloud Fundamentals cert, just because Microsoft was giving away free training for that. And it was, if you took the class, then you got a voucher to take that cert. So same type of idea. I was like, hey, this is a very good, solid foundational cert for folks that are getting into the industry. So might as well take it, create some study content, do some, practice test walkthrough videos and some review videos and stuff like that. So I would say that the majority of my time when it comes to technical stuff is more so creating content for other folks, junior folks trying to get into the industry. A lot of YouTube stuff, a lot of blog posts. I actually wrote a book last year. It's a Network Plus study guide. You can get it at Barnes and Noble and on Amazon. Then I developed a 40 lesson class that coincides with that book, which is offered by a learning institute. You actually can also get 3 college credits for taking the class as well. So that's kind of cool. Yeah, so it's at this point, it's pretty much just trying to give back as much as I can, try and, mentor and provide as much valuable information for folks who are trying to get in.
That's freaking awesome. Thank you so much for your time and everything. One last question is, do you have any last tips for people who want to get into cybersecurity?
I mean, the main thing is figuring out why you want to get into cybersecurity. So there's so many different avenues in cybersecurity. And normally when people say that, I want to get into cybersecurity, I don't think that they've thought about it that much. Right. And I get that cybersecurity can pay a lot of money. Right. And it's kind of, a sexy career field that people can gravitate to. But there's so much about it. It would be like saying, I want to get into the medical field. Okay, well, what does that mean? Do you want to sell medical supplies? Do you want to be a pharmacist? Do you want to be a doctor? Do you want to be a nurse? Do you want to, do physical therapy? Do you, there's so many different things, and cybersecurity is the same way. So the first thing, whenever anybody says that, is, say, okay, that's awesome that you have the perspective that this is something that might be interesting to you. You probably need to go back and do a little bit of research into what is it about cybersecurity that attracts you to it. What is your background as far as other jobs and education that you have, that you might have other types of skills where maybe there's some overlap, right? Or something that you used to do that kind of has some applicability into cybersecurity. So that would kind of be like the first thing that I would point them to. And then once they kind of have an idea of a few different areas that they might be interested in, I would tell them to start engaging with people that are in the career field as much as they can. When I was coming up, there wasn't really social media and a whole bunch of people that were out there sharing information and things like that. There wasn't a lot of conferences that were available. There's so much sharing of useful information on social media, on YouTube, on free conferences, that I think that it's really beneficial and can really give people a head start. Back when I started in IT, the only thing that you had to go to like the bookstore and buy a book. That was it, right? So if you knew somebody who was doing whatever it was that you wanted to do, then you could ask them questions. But that wasn't, on social media, that wasn't a virtual type of thing. You just had to be lucky enough to either already be in an IT career field or something like that, that you could ping people for different types of information. Or, you start taking a class in college, or you end up finding a book or something like that. And I think now the accessibility of information, and people sharing their expertise and people sharing how they screwed up or how they were successful. There's lots of different avenues that you can kind of give yourself a good head start and kind of learn off of other people's experiences and their mistakes and things like that, so that you can position yourself to, find something that you really enjoy doing. And that's can be a pretty lucrative career, if you end up going that way.
For sure. But like you said many times in this conversation before, invest in yourself.
Mhm.
Sorry about that,
Yep.
folks. That was my microphone. Take the time to invest in yourself. Take the time to explore your opportunities and take the time to learn. You have plenty of time. Take the time, use it well. Thank you
Yep.
very much for watching, everybody. Thank you so much for being here, my friend John. Everybody, if
Yep.
you
It was great. It was great meeting you. Thanks for having me on.
thanks for being here. That was such an honor. I tweeted at you and you said yes, and I was like a little bit of a fangirl, like, oh yeah, he said yes. So thank you very much. I had a lot of useful information from this conversation, very, very much so. Um, I want to thank you, everybody. If you want some more information, everything is going to be in the description below, including the book and the class. So thank you for your time. Bye-bye, everybody. See you later.
Thank you.